presented by Geico. Switch to Geico and see all the ways that you could save. Mike Clay, Daniel Dopp, and our friend Liz Loza breaking down everything you need from the Week 5 action. Liz, it's so great to see you. Thank you for joining us again. Is it okay that Mike is here? I didn't ask. I didn't let you know. Mike's joining us instead of Field. Is that all right?
If not, I'll leave. It's okay.
No, I'm thrilled that Mike is here. I barely get to work with him. Mike, it's so great to have you.
You see how we waited until you were live on air? Because if you said no, then that would have been awkward and would have looked bad. So we waited till you were in a spot where you basically had to say yes. So thank you. Yeah. Appreciate that, Liz.
Way to go, Liz. So far, you are just crushing the start of this show with the way that, hey, and with that being said, let's just start everything off, Liz. We do a segment called Crushed It or Flushed It this week. You again get crushed it because you like talking about the good players because it's a little bit more fun. So who do you think crushed it here in Week 5 for you?
Well, first of all, you're crushing it as a host, my friend.
Stop
so
it.
Feel free to take a victory lap of your own, but your victory lap does not get to be as intense as Nick Chubb's because he can run better than all of us and maybe all of the running backs in the NFL as well. 134 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, no catches. In fact, here's the asterisk that we were all worried about in August while we were drafting, right? Just 6 catches in 5 games. But who cares when you are going over 15 fantasy points and over 110 total yards in every game this season? Nick Chubb entered this week averaging 5.7 yards per touch, and then he averaged 7.9 yards per carry. Now, you have to imagine next week against New England, the Patriots are going to sell out to stop him, but I don't think they can.
Gosh.
Running backs are not supposed to be as good as him. They're the kind of guys who I love to watch play. They're awesome. You want to root for them, but they just break the projection model. I can't project a guy for 6 yards per carry at running back. It's not reasonable to sustain that going forward. And what has he done his whole career? He keeps doing it. He's the exception to the rule. He's fantastic. And you're right. He hasn't had the passing down work, but he's still been super productive.
A lot of people have said this about Nick Chubb and how he breaks your model. He's sort of like the Taysom Hill of running backs is the way that they talk about Nick Chubb.
Can we just not talk about Taysom Hill today, please?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, probably not. We're going to talk about him a little bit later. All right, Liz, give us another running back that you like this week.
Well, from one anomaly at the position to another one, King Henry still polishing that crown. 102 rushing yards and another 2 tubs this week on the ground. Also 2 catches for 30 yards. So he doesn't have the same asterisk as Nick Chubb, at least so far this season. He's got 30 receiving yards in 3 straight games. The only game he was catchless was only games he was catchless were in weeks 1 and 2, but now we're seeing him get a little action in the receiving game, and we love it.
Absolutely. Although we did watch, to be fair, he did crush it, but I did watch Dontel Hilliard get another receiving touchdown, and I just wanted to smash my fist on the table. It's real hard.
Speaking of players that help nobody.
However, the volume that you just talked about, he's 28 carries and 2 catches. So you're talking about 30 touches in this game. You're taking that every single week.
Of course. He's good to go. There's really concerns that he might drop off with his age now and his workload are pretty much gone, right? In fact, we're getting, even if his rushing production went down, right? We're picking it up a little bit with the pass catching, which is huge. So he's terrific. He's an elite RB1, much like Nick Chubb is right now, and much like some of the other guys we're about to talk about.
All right, so let's talk about your guy, Mike. First time doing crushed it or flushed it.
It is.
Who's your number 1 crushed it for week 5?
You might have to crush or flush me after I do this segment. We'll see how it goes. But we're going to start with Gabe Davis, of course, right? On Fantasy Football Now, we talked about him, and we said, this is the week. It's going to happen. Everything was setting up. Guys were injured. It was a good matchup. They had to get the ball in his hands, and it worked out great. One of the first plays of the game was a 98-yard touchdown, and that was not his most impressive play of the game because he later had a one-handed 62-yard touchdown in the game. He was terrific. You look at players with multiple 60-yard touchdown catches in a game since 2000. I thought this was an interesting nugget from Kyle. It is Gabe Davis, Jamar Chase, Odell Beckham, Lee Evans, Torrey Holt. That's a who's who of outstanding receivers, and now Gabe Davis is added to that list. Now, he was awesome today. We're going to get these explosive plays out of him at times, but I am still a little worried about the volume, right? 6 or fewer targets in all 4 games. He has 2 games with 18 or more fantasy points, but 2 with fewer than 7 points. I want a larger target share. Let's get him to 20% consistently. If we don't get that, he's going to be a boom bust start, very much like a Mike Williams.
That's totally fair. Liz, you had a prop on Gabe Davis from earlier this week. Did it hit today?
I had a ladder on Gabe Davis, and it hit in the first quarter. Yeah, that was great.
Right.
I was going to say, if it was an over, it hit.
That's right.
There it is.
Over 45.5 receiving yards, longest catch, over 20.5 yards, and a touchdown. Wow.
That'll work.
Wow.
Yeah, one play. That's all it took.
Gosh,
well done.
I am with you though, Mike. I was not as much of a Gabe Davis hyper over the summer because I imagined he'd be really boomer bust. And the asterisk, since we're talking about a lot of asterisks this week, was that Jamison Crowder, Isaiah McKenzie, and Dawson Knox, the other red zone weapon here in Buffalo, were not on the field. So that definitely boosted Davis's opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. All right, Mike, let's talk one more. This one hurts a little bit because I had to watch this game with you.
Rhamondre Stevenson.
Yeah.
And he was in the DFS lineup.
He was.
That we gave out on FF Now as well and on the podcast last week. So he hit, and it came through in a big way. Now, look, Damien Harris left this game injured. That was part of why Stevenson had so much volume in this one. He played 50 of 56 offensive snaps, but he was well on his way to a big day even before that. Ends up with 161 rushing yards, 2 catches, and 14 yards, almost 20 fantasy points. Look, when he has been given the workload in this backfield, he has performed, right? 6 career games with 15 or more touches. He's averaging 18.4 fantasy points per game. And look, the last 3 weeks, the volume's been there. He's been over 20 touches per game. He's averaging over 121 scrimmage yards per game. He has been productive even during games when Damien Harris has been on the field as well. And, he's been over 100 scrimmage yards in 5 of 17 games in his career, which is a pretty nice hit rate for a guy that's only played about 40% of the snaps. The guy is good, and his role just continues to expand. He should be locked into lineups right now.
I'm with you. Unfortunately, after watching him this week, he really gave it to the Detroit Lions. We'll see how things shake out with the Damien Harris injury and what it looks like for the weeks forward. All right, Liz, let us talk players who flushed it now. We'll move forward. This is a little bit less fun. However, Jalen Waddle was tough. Boy, as a Jalen Waddle manager, it was just not fun. 5.3 fantasy points.
Is that bad?
That's not bad. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's his second week under 6 fantasy points. And, I have to say I'm sorry because I received a start-sit question ahead of the games, and someone was like, I'm a little bit worried about Waddle with the groin issue and Teddy Bridgewater. And I was like, no, man, don't sweat it. Like, the ceiling is too good. Yikes. My apologies. Teddy Bridgewater goes out after the first play of the game. We've got Skylar Thompson completing 19 of 33 and not really looking at Waddle, which was surprising. They did lean on the backfield instead, and Mostert had himself a game. Still, I'm not sure that I'm going to move Waddle that much in my rankings, and maybe I'm being stubborn, but it's hard to imagine he doesn't post top 15 numbers against Minnesota next week.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. Like, long term, I still feel really good about Jalen Waddle.
For sure.
It's a tough week here.
And 2L, we expect back soon, and once that happens, he should be all systems go.
Yeah, what about Christian Kirk, Liz? Because this one was really tough for me. I had Christian Kirk in a ton of leagues, and I have loved him so far this year. It's really frustrating here, week 5.
Yeah, he opened the season with 17 or more fantasy points for 3 straight weeks, but it has been duds in back-to-back efforts. I think we maybe have not properly graded the Houston Texans. Their secondary has only allowed 1 touchdown to opposing wide receivers heading into this week. And Desmond King, it's tough because he's not really picked on that much, but he's only allowed 4 receptions so far. And I have to watch this a little bit more closely, but I'm imagining much of the battle is between King and Kirk. I think I'm probably going to look at Kirk more as a wide receiver, high-end wide receiver 3 option instead of an automatic wide receiver 2 option, mostly because of the volume here, only 3 targets, and he did not have a ton of looks last week either.
Yeah, interesting. It's so frustrating. I wanted so much more from this team and from this offense, and we just didn't get it this week.
Yeah, I think he'll be okay, too. I tend to agree. Still starting him. He had a dud game, but he started the season with 4 good games, right? I think the target share is fine. He's well paid to be the number 1 there. Better days ahead. And by the way, I think King was on him a little more than half the time. I looked at the routes a little bit before. So on the right track there. Desmond King's pretty good.
Yeah, he's not bad. Not bad at football, some people say.
Yeah, or maybe hashtag good at football.
Hashtag good at football, I think, is a better way to say that. You're right, Mike. All right, let's talk a couple more players here that flushed it this week.
Okay, you're up, man.
I want to talk about A.J. Dillon. Can we talk about A.J. Dillon? I love A.J. Dillon. And this week, it just feels like the Green Bay Packers did not want to use him. It was the Aaron Jones show for all intents and purposes. 20.1 fantasy points in week 1. since then, he's had only single-digit performances in all 4 weeks since 5 catches in week 1. That was a big part of it. Big part of getting to 20.1 points. Only 1 catch in each of the weeks since then. So I know better days are ahead for A.J. Dillon, but I feel more concerned now than I was before seeing the efficiencies of Aaron Jones's touches within this backfield and the way that it feels like my expectation of that, some of that passing game that we heard earlier on in training camp and in draft season that he might get, doesn't feel like it's there 5 weeks into the season anymore.
Yeah, no doubt. And he did have a lot of duds last season, and this was the warning coming into the season. You might have some huge games, and then you're going to have a whole bunch of down games, and that's just what comes with the territory of being the 1B running back. And we've seen his passing down work kind of disappear the past couple of weeks. He's a really good player, but Aaron Jones is just outplaying him right now, and the Packers seem to have noticed that, and they expanded Aaron Jones's role in this game. And obviously, Dillon has suffered in terms of volume and obviously fantasy production.
Absolutely. He's just Aaron Jones, so much more efficient right now than A.J. Dillon is, which is really frustrating. All right, another player for me to flush it. Drake London, 4 catches on 7 targets for 35 yards. Under 55 yards in 3 straight games.
Don't love that.
And here's the deal. He had no Kyle Pitts this week. He had no Cordero Patterson this week. Everything lined up for what seemed like massive Drake London usage here, right? Even though it was a tough matchup against the Bucs. And we just didn't get it at all. 4 catches, 35 yards, 7.5 fantasy points. I don't understand if this is how bad the Atlanta Falcons offense is going to run, right? I don't know how I'm going to have confidence week in and week out to say this is going to be a good decision as long as Marcus Mariota is under center, because it just feels like whether it's Arthur Smith or Mariota and the way that this is working with his pass catchers, I don't feel confident, man.
It is tough to trust this offense, but I will say this. Drake London has still, after this game, has a 33% target share.
Well, that's really big.
And I'm not sure I've ever benched a player with a 33% target share. I just don't know how you could do that. I think the highest I've seen in the past decade is like 39% one year from Brandon Marshall. It's just a massive number. And regardless of the volume in that pass offense, 33% is going to carry you a long way. So I'm going to stick with Drake London for now, and hopefully we get back to what we saw earlier this season.
Yeah, I need more efficiency from those targets. I need them to be better, more on target. Maybe Desmond Ridder. What about some Desmond Ridder out here?
I hope so. At some point, might help.
All right, Mike, let's talk about some players. We need to adjust it heading out of week 5. It's a new thing. Usually we do crushed it or flushed it. With you here, we decided to adjust it, seeing as you're our numbers guy.
Oh, okay. All right. So you want to talk some numbers? Let's talk about Breece Hall and what he did today. 97 rushing yards, had a touchdown, also had 2 catches for 100 yards. That's 50 yards a catch. That seems pretty good as well. Almost 28 fantasy points. He was terrific. Actually, he was tackled at the 1-yard line twice. So perhaps this could have even been a better fantasy day here for Breece Hall. And here's the thing. He has taken control of the backfield. 38 snaps in this game, 25 for Michael Carter. Hall has now led 3 consecutive weeks. And this is 4 consecutive top 15s now in fantasy points for Breece Hall. He's RB6 for the season. This is what we hope for. You know, it seems like the first running back picked in the NFL draft just seems to be a fantasy star pretty quickly. And that trend continues because Breece Hall has been fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Looks like a fantastic running back. Also, Al Smiz's feature on the CSS DFS podcast, if you listen to that show, if you play Breece Hall, it might have made a little bit of money this week. All right. Who else do we have here this week? Because I see James Robinson on this list, and I don't think James Robinson had a very good game. So are we adjusting down for him?
Yeah, by the way, like Breece Hall, we're adjusting up.
Yes.
I guess I should have mentioned that.
Yeah.
Obviously, hopefully that was obvious. James Robinson, we're adjusting down.
Yeah.
Okay, he's going the wrong way here. 27 rushing yards in this game, 2 catches for 12 yards. And Travis Etienne led the way in snaps. He played 39. Robinson played 30. And you look at the last 2 weeks. This is not a 1-week thing, right? We're sensing a trend here. The last 2 games, Etienne holds an edge in snaps, in targets, in pass routes. They're actually tied in carry. So we thought coming into the season, maybe Etienne would be the lead back with Robinson helping out and seeing 10 to 12 touches. That was not the case, but now we are starting to get to that point. Also, Robinson only a 5% target share this season. That's not enough work in the passing game for him to be in the RB1 conversation like he was the first few weeks of the season. Just a massive drop-off. You compare his first 3 games to the last 2. Goes from 57 touches to 20, from 263 yards to 68, from 4 touchdowns in the first 3 games to 0 over the last 2, right? It's just a complete change in what we've seen out of him. I know 2 games is a small sample, but he's trending the wrong way right now, and Etienne's just looking good.
Yes, he is. Yeah. All right. I don't know what to do about it because you're going to keep James Robinson. You're not getting rid of James Robinson. But
yeah, what's Liz think? You with me?
I think that maybe the ETN target share, at least this week, was partially boosted by the fact that Christian Kirk was so swallowed. I don't know if I really am buying. I mean, the snap share is the snap share, but I still feel like next week they've got the Colts, right? Like that's going to be an ugly, low-scoring game. I have to imagine, like the projection, the over/under is probably not going to come out ahead of 43.5, right? Like. And we did see Melvin Gordon be fairly efficient against the Colts run defense. So I'm not ready to write James Robinson off. I think he's probably one breakaway run away from being reinstalled as the king of the backfield.
It's just tough though. I mean, if we do think there's going to be low scoring games, can they support two fantasy relevant running backs? And if so, which one, and if ETN's taking control, I think he's getting there, right? He seems like he's starting to take a little bit of control. Maybe it's like the Packers, right? It's a 1A and 1B, and that could be problematic on a week-to-week basis. So we'll have to keep an eye on this. For now, though, I think they're both probably in the flex conversation for the time being.
Another guy that we are keeping an eye on, Mike, is freaking Geno Smith, because this guy not only will not go away, but he is endearing himself to fantasy managers' hearts everywhere as a streaming quarterback.
Yeah, look, this guy was an early draft pick years ago, and it did not work out with the Jets, obviously, and he's moved around the league. Maybe he's just having a late career breakout because things are happening for him in Seattle. Who would have thought Russell Wilson was holding this offense back for years? I mean, who would have thought that? But he has been terrific, and another great game today, 268 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Didn't do much with his legs today, but look, he now has multiple touchdown passes in 4 of 5 games this season. So he's becoming fantasy relevant, and that is what has happened. Over 18 fantasy points in 3 straight games, a top 7 quarterback in all of those weeks. Gets Arizona next week, and we're talking about him as a QB1 now. He is on that. You're in that conversation, depending on the matchup at the very least.
Absolutely. I mean, coming out of that Lions game, we expected him to put up a ton of points because the Lions defense is bad, and we thought this week, much tougher test, not going to be the same thing. Watching Geno, I don't want to say watching Geno cook, but watching Geno be so bad with this
at least someone's cooking from that conversation.
Exactly. It was fantastic. You love to be able to see this guy. At least I do, especially if you've got some shares of his wide receivers in any of your offenses.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Man. We were talking about this before the show. Like, if you drafted best ball or really anything all offseason, you saw DK Metcalf at the top of your queue for a while, and it didn't feel great picking him. And you especially saw Tyler Lockett at the top of your queue going through drafts. Draft after draft after draft. He was always the top guy there, and you just sitting there. You're like, I don't want him. That offense is going to be terrible. And if you took a chance and you bet on volume and talent, well, congratulations.
Yeah.
It's working out.
DK and
What if you also bet on the Pete Carroll effect? Like, I've been thinking about this in my spare time, and it's something that my friend Chris Wessling used to say to me, which was, there's a reason that college coaches maybe lose the faith of their players after 4 or so years because they get tired of the rah-rah. And is there no bigger rah-rah coach than Pete Carroll? And maybe the new quarter, Russ, we've seen players out of Seattle kind of leave and get a little done with the shtick, if you will. And now you're seeing Geno Smith take his opportunity and buy into it. And the whole team, with that one piece renewed, also seems to be reinvesting in it. And I have to imagine in the back of my head, there's a little bit of that Pete Carroll magic that's happening here.
Yeah, I think it's Pete Carroll magic. I think Mina Kimes has sprinkled a little bit of dust on top of it too, whatever they can,
For sure. Yeah, I mean, the last few years, I think we all thought, what is Pete Carroll doing? He's not maximizing Russell Wilson. It's his fault. And maybe we were all wrong. And we should have trusted in the guy
or Geno Smith. Yeah,
absolutely. What can you say? Results are there.
Gosh. All right. We're actually going to talk about that game when we come back. But first, Mike, tell us about our friends over at Geico.
I sure will. Geico asks, how would you love a chance to save some money on insurance?
Would love it.
Of course you would. And when it comes to great rates on insurance, Geico can help, like with insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and RV. Even help with homeowners or renters coverage. Plus, add an easy-to-use mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance, and more. And Geico is an easy choice. Switch today and see all the ways you could save. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com or contact your local agent today.
Did you know that there are currently over 2.4 million podcasts in the world, including the one you're listening to right now?
Wow.
And it takes a team of people to help bring these podcasts together. From the production team to the graphics team or the makeup team, Mike and I need that a lot. It really does take an army of people to do this thing right. And needless to say, hiring the right people for those roles are really important. And whether you're hiring for a podcast or for your growing business, there's only one place that makes it easy: ZipRecruiter. And now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/FFF. ZipRecruiter uses its powerful technology to find and match the right candidates up with your job. You can easily review these recommended candidates and invite your top choices to apply. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. So if you're a fan of this podcast and you want to try ZipRecruiter for free, you need to go to ZipRecruiter.com/FFF. That is our special URL. Once again, ZipRecruiter.com/FFF. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. All right, we're going to work our way through some of these Week 5 games of note. Each one of us picked a game that we wanted to talk about. Mike, you picked the Seahawks and Saints. And I want to start really quickly. Unfortunately, this was a really fun game. However, something really tough happened in this game. Obviously, we watched Rashad Penny go down, left early, and we got this tweet from Brady Henderson that we want to be able to read. Pete Carroll said that Rashad Penny is hurt bad. He didn't declare him out for the rest of the year. However, it did give the impression that that was the case. Carroll said that he's heartbroken for Penny and that Penny is crushed after this, which was just really tough to be able to watch on the field after Rashad Penny looked great last week, and we've seen him do some of the stuff that he's done, but unfortunately didn't work out this week.
Yeah, not looking good moving forward, and it's too bad. He's been one of the most effective running backs in the NFL since he's been in the league on a per-play basis, but just has struggled with injuries, and it's too bad. You hate to see it, but, hate to put a fantasy spin on anything after anything like this, but hopefully Penny will be healthy and back strong next year, or hopefully, or maybe later this season. Who knows? We don't know for sure.
Yep.
But we'll keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, it does present an opportunity here for Kenneth Walker, right? They took him in the second round this year. His role is obviously going to grow. And in this game, he played 26 snaps. DJ Dallas played 11. So he did have pretty clear control as essentially the new number one back at 8 carries, ran 12 pass routes. DJ Dallas 1 carry and 8 routes. And I think that latter is notable, that he had an edge in passing situations, which is an area that was a concern for him coming to the NFL, whereas Dallas at times has been their primary pass catcher in Seattle. So that's a good sign for him. The Seahawks do have a very low team target share to the running back position this year, which could potentially limit his upside a little bit. But if Walker handles the bulk of the carries here, and he did look good, by the way, he had a long run. He had 88 yards on 8 carries and a touchdown in this game. He's going to be on the RB2 radar, right? So he is obviously a big boost in value here, and a guy that we're going to have in lineups moving forward.
Absolutely. I'm sure we will talk about him tomorrow with Eric Moody as a part of our waiver wire segment. And Mike, it's also kind of shocking as a part of this offense to say this, but with Geno Smith under center, it sort of feels like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett have become lineup locks now. Is that safe to say after 5 weeks of the season?
I mean, well, let me give you some numbers.
Okay.
How about that? And you tell me, okay? So both have scored over 13 fantasy points in 3 straight games.
Okay.
DK Metcalf has a 50-plus yard catch in 2 straight games and 5-plus catches in 4 out of the 5 games this year.
That's pretty good.
Tyler Lockett over 75 receiving yards in 4 straight games.
Okay, that's awesome.
And how about this? This is probably maybe the most surprising stat. DK Metcalf has a 28% target share.
That's high.
Tyler Lockett's is 26%. They're both career highs. Wow. They were never this high, even with Russell Wilson. So what do you think?
I think that yes.
Yes, I think yes is the answer. Yeah, we're locking those guys in.
I mean, if this offense is gonna keep moving, it's not just Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. I mean, obviously this is part of it. If Geno Smith is gonna move the ball and we're gonna watch this offense continue to move, the idea of being able to pick up Kenneth Walker off of waivers and potentially use him, this whole offense is fantasy friendly right now.
And that's part of it. I just mentioned 28 and 26%. That's 52. So that means over half of every ball Geno throws on target is going to one of those two guys. They don't really use Marquise Goodwin or Penny Hart or any of these other D. Eskridge. He hasn't panned out. He's throwing all the balls to pretty much those two guys, and then they split some between Noah Fant and Will Disley. So those are the guys. That's where they're funneling all the targets. Yeah, I think for now, until they show otherwise, they should be locked in the lineups.
All right, let's talk about the Saints, and I want to start with Chris Olave, who looked awesome. Unfortunately, left this game as well. Something else we're going to have to continue to monitor. We're going to have to wait for Stefania on Tuesday's show to have more on him. However, he did look great 3 straight games with 15 or more fantasy points, man. I mean, he looks like the real deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if I have to add much more other than he's basically emerged as the number one. He's a vertical threat. At some point, Jameis Winston will be back, and he was the one throwing the ball to him deep downfield, but he's produced regardless of who's under center so far. Even when Michael Thomas comes back, Olave might be their most targeted player. So Olave, if he's healthy, should be in lineups.
Maybe their most targeted player, but do you think their best and highest scoring fantasy player in Taysom Hill? Does Taysom Hill need to be rostered? Don't you hate?
No.
Here's the thing. Every time Taysom Hill has a good game, we have to go through this whole rigmarole.
I know.
I don't know where that term came from, but it means something.
It means something.
And it feels like we've got to ask this question every single time. Boy, Taysom Hill was really great, Mike. Should I add him to my fantasy team?
How many players are fantasy relevant who on the season have 1 target and 1 pass attempt?
Probably not many.
Probably Taysom Hill. That's it. That's the only one. The guy is averaging 10.9 yards per carry this season, which is ridiculous. And he's not going to sustain that going forward. He's averaging 5.3 carries per game. Again, 1 target, 1 pass attempt on the season. He had an incredible game. He's a nice piece for the Saints team, but there's a reason why he's not on rosters. And the reason is because he now will disappear for 4 weeks.
That's true.
Right. And not be, he's just not reliable right now. So if you're really desperate at tight end and you want to throw a dart, fine. But this is the best game he's ever had as a non-quarterback, aside of when he's played some quarterback, which he's not doing. And you're just banking on him having long touchdown runs, which, I mean, the best running backs in NFL history can't sustain this level of production that he's done through the first month of the season here, specifically today. So I have no interest in Taysom Hill. I'm not going to pick him up. I'm going to spend that fab elsewhere.
Yeah, I have no interest in Taysom Hill either, Liz, because he keeps taking touchdowns away from Alvin Kamara, who's supposed to be the guy that gets in the end zone here.
Indeed. I mean, you see Alvin Kamara, though, we talked about him on Wednesday's pod, coming back healthier and 29 touches, 194 yards. Like, you have to, season prior, 29 touches for 119 yards. So he's looking even better. This man has been a top 10 producer no matter what. I think he was inside the top 10 last season, and he missed like 3 or 4 games overall. He's the first player with 100 rushing yards and 90 receiving yards since Saquon Barkley, which was back in week 16 of 2019, pre-pandemic. These numbers are vintage, if you will.
Yeah, vintage.
Yeah, he looks like he's back. He didn't seem quite as electric as he's been in years past, but it didn't matter. He still put almost 200 yards and is a big part of the Saints offense. So he's good to go. And by the way, just to put a wrap on this game, Seattle defense, maybe taking the place of your Detroit Lion defense as the defense to pick on. They have allowed the most scrimmage yards and touchdowns. They're tied with Detroit in the touchdown department to opposing offenses this season, and they play Kyler Murray and the Cardinals next week. So they'll be popular in DFS and as streaming options, I would imagine.
Yes, they will.
How about this? Start Kyler Murray against Seattle.
That's a good.
We're gonna do that.
We're
gonna do that.
All right, I am gonna talk Lions and Patriots, and not because it was fun. At all. There was nothing fun about this game at all.
It's fun for Patriots fans.
Yeah, maybe for Patriots fans. Let's start with the Detroit Lions, though. Jared Goff, 229 yards, an interception, 7 rushing yards, and a fumble. Talked about him as a potential streamer against this Patriots defense. That was the wrong call. It was really
did not
tough.
work out.
It was awful this week across the board. Jamal Williams, 5.6 fantasy points. Amon-Ra St. Brown, only 6 targets, 5.8 fantasy points for him. TJ Hockenson, he had a freaking career day last week. 1.6 fantasy points here. This entire offense just looked bad. And I don't know if this was, we talked about it beforehand. Amon-Ra St. Brown was definitely limited, right? We were wanting to see what he was going to look like in this game. Didn't run as many routes as we were hoping. That definitely could have affected this offense. But
only 20 snaps for him. So if you're wondering why maybe his production was down, he was clearly limited in this one.
But this is tough for me because this offense, if this is what's going to look like with Jared Goff right now for this Patriots team, we need a break. So very lucky. Lions are getting a bye here in week 6. So that's something to keep aware of. There are buys now. We have buys coming up in fantasy, which is fantastic. Make better plans if you have Jared Goff or any of these Lions. But man, I don't know what else to say other than this was just a really disappointing game from what was fantasy's #1 scoring offense coming into the week.
Yeah, and the Patriots weren't exactly stopping opposing passing games either, right? So very disappointing, but Bill Belichick tends to do this sometimes, right?
Yes.
He just has a good game plan and shuts the other team down. Lions clearly beat up, so I'm with you. Just be patient here. You don't have to keep Goff on your roster, but Jamal Williams, Swift, Amon-Ra, Hawkinson, you're holding tight on those guys through the bye, obviously. Maybe Josh Reynolds, too. I mean, if you have him, he's been good. I mean, it's a month of good play for him.
All right, let's talk about the other side of that. You already talked about Rhamondre Stevenson. Thank you for doing that for me. Jacoby Myers, though, 7 catches on 8 targets for 111 yards and a touchdown, even with Bailey Zappi under center. He looked fantastic. Second best game of his career. I don't know how much of this you can continue to count on from him. You know, from Bailey Zappi. You think so?
Well, I don't know how many more starts Zappi's making, right? We could have Mac Jones back in the next game, but I mean, from Myers.
Myers is, he's a startable wide receiver.
27 targets in 3 full games this year. Yep. Loved him all season. It was too bad we missed him for a couple of games with the injury, but he's back and a full go now. And he scored a touchdown. He doesn't score touchdowns.
Yes.
If he starts scoring touchdowns now, he's going to be, might finish top 15, top 20 going forward.
All right, Liz, let's talk Steelers and Bills. I don't even know which side you want to talk about because the Bills are, I think they're the only team that showed up to play this week, aren't they?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, come on. We got a rookie quarterback under center on the other side of
you're right.
This
That's
matchup
fair.
here. We already talked about Gabe Davis. You're not going to sit Stephon Diggs. And, you know, Devin Singletary's got a floor that's attached to this offense, so there's always going to be a flex-worthy piece of it to offer. So let's stick with the Steelers since we are dealing with a new quarterback. Kenny Pickett threw the ball 52 times in this one. Yeah, he connected 34 of those times. So we're going to see a lot of big target totals for Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and Chase Claypool. Also want to note that Pat Freiermuth, who definitely showed rapport with the rookie quarterback last week, was knocked out of this game in the third quarter with a concussion. He also has a history of concussions. I'm sure Stefania will go into it on tomorrow's pod. He recorded 2 his rookie season last year, so something to keep an eye on right now. But Deontay Johnson, let's start at the top of the pecking order. 13 targets, caught 5 of those. We've got some efficiency issues to work through with a green signal caller. Not too surprising. He's now, however, Johnson has gone over 10 targets in 3 of 4 games this season, but only 60 yards one of those weeks. So again, we have some efficiency issues to work through. George Pickens is the exciting piece though, right? 8 targets, 6 catches. Chemistry we saw flashing last week between him and Pickett, and this week much more efficient, 83 yards. I looked up Pickens this week. His percentage rostered has gone up nearly 13% in ESPN fantasy leagues, but he is still available in just under 50% of leagues. So if you are one of those rare managers who is looking, especially with buys and injuries, buys are now here and injuries are continuing to mount, needing like a ceiling play, Pickens is your guy. Chase Claypool, 9 targets, 5 catches. Again, efficiency issues, but 90 yards doing Chase Claypool sort of things when given the opportunity. Of these 3 wide receivers, I'm interested to see what you two think. Who is the player that you're most interested in throwing a dart at on a week-to-week basis?
We were talking about this.
Yeah. I mean, it's Deontay Johnson for sure. 13 targets, still led the way. This is what I wanted to see because a lot of Kenny Pickett's throws did not go to him. Only 2 of 13 in his first, when he stepped in, of course, in week 4. But we saw 13 in this game. I know the production wasn't great, but it's still Deontay Johnson, and he had some nice plays in this game. I think he had, was that a touchdown where he was right near the goal line?
Catch that he made?
Was on the sideline, I forget. Yeah. But anyway, I lost a catch on that one too. But I think he's the most likely to have a solid floor, and obviously he's been the most productive player from this group.
I will say, and I've rostered George Pickens in a handful of leagues, just waiting for what comes next, hopefully. And he's a tough guy to be able to drop because I feel like he's now on that cusp of like you've waited the first couple of weeks and now he's here. But I don't know from this standpoint. You're looking at this 13 targets, 8 targets, 9 targets. Part of that is because Pat Freiermuth was out. But we talked about how is this going to be sustainable? Are they going to be able to throw this much? And if their offense is bad and they're down all the time, then this might be sustainable from a passing perspective.
Yeah, and
I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
And now that we've seen TJ Watt have an additional setback, how this defense is not what it was supposed to be heading into the season. I think we love a quarterback that throws a ton because his defense is putting him in a hole frequently. I'm not worried about this volume, especially, I mean, come on, are we really believing that all 4 of these players are going to be healthy 100% of the time? This is football. That's not possible. I think there's going to be solid volume for Pickens and Johnson on a regular basis, especially since Pickett, my friend, does not like to check down to the running back. Najee Harris not seeing those Ben Roethlisbergian checkdowns at all. He has just one game over 60 rushing yards, and he's been under 20 receiving yards in 4 of the last 5.
Yikes.
Yeah, and keep in mind, they played the Bills, right? Like we had a low bar set for this offense. Kenny Pickett's first start. Playing the Bills, I mean, we just didn't expect much. There will be better days ahead. I mean, they do have a tough rest of the month coming up, but it's not the Bills, right? So better days ahead. They'll score some touchdowns.
Real quick question for you, Liz. Where did you have Najee Harris ranked this week?
Oh, probably RB 14-ish is what I'm guessing.
RB 14-ish? Okay. Tough week this week. I don't think it's going to get any better next week as they take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So
he's not getting targets, and he has to run against that defense. Not great. I think I had him at like 24 this week, and maybe that was too high. Maybe we have to go lower. I don't know.
6.6 fantasy points. I'm not sure. We'll going to get a lot better next week.
Still work to be done on the ranks. But anyway,
I had him
trending
at
the wrong way.
RB20.
There you go.
All right. I had him at RB20. Clay had him at 24.
Gosh. The fact that we even had Najee down there and then he finished lower.
He was RB3 last year. It's just not going great.
Usage is totally different. All right, Mike, let's pay some bills. We'll come back, talk about a few more players.
Okay. Fantasy football season is here, and that means more of what you love. The teams, the rivalries, the trash-talking friends, the constantly updating databases, and endless flow of stats. Oh, I like that part.
Yeah.
This season, you know your favorite players are hydrating with Body Armor, sports drink on and off the field. And hey, this fall is a great time to up your game too. Maybe you're hitting the gym again or just looking to stay fit. Whatever your workout routine, you're going to need to stay hydrated.
Yeah.
And Body Armor has you covered. Made with potassium-packed electrolytes, antioxidants, no artificial sweeteners, flavors or dyes, and coconut water. It's a great time to grab some Body Armor sports drink for yourself. Body Armor is a great option whether you're playing ball with friends, hauling coolers to a tailgate, or rooting for your team. Body Armor sports drink, more than a sports drink. Now through November 1st, buy any one Body Armor product at your local convenience store and scan the QR code in-store to enter to be one of hundreds of winners to receive $100 in DraftKings prizing. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Open to residents of U.S. 21 and older.
Lions, Tigers, and tailgates. Oh my, the college football season is always a great time of year. Besides the jerseys, the face paint, and the foam fingers, there's also the food. And nothing gets you more fired up for game day than Eckrich smoked sausage. They're naturally hardwood smoked and have the perfect blend of spices from buffalo sausage dip to sausage, chili, mac and cheese. Eckrich smoked sausage is a quick way to bring flavor to all your tailgate meals. Visit Eckrich.com for easy, one-of-a-kind sausage recipes. Eckrich, you do you. All right, let's talk about a couple players of note here from Week 5. Mike Clay, we're going to start with you. These players are brought to you by Geico. Our friends over at Geico, switch to Geico. See all the ways that you could save. We're going to start with Damien Pierce, who has been getting capital V volume over the last couple of weeks, Mike Clay.
Oh, yes, he has. And he has 18-plus fantasy points in 3 consecutive games, a rushing touchdown, and multiple catches in all 3 of those games. And he already started to take control of the rushing workload. We knew that. But now they're starting to expand his passing game role as well. And we just talked about Najee Harris, right? And how last year he was RB3 in fantasy, and he had that huge workload, right? That was the thing. It was volume. Huge share of the carries.
He was getting
huge
targets
share of the passing down workload. And that was enough, even with poor efficiency, to be a fantasy star. Well, check this out. Last year, Najee Harris handled 84% of the carries and a 14% target share.
Okay.
Well, over the last 2 weeks, Damien Pierce is averaging 89% of the carries and 19% of the targets. So those are both higher than where Najee Harris was last year.
I thought they had Rex Burkhead on this team as the pass-catching running back.
They do, and he is actually seeing quite a few targets as well, but Davis Mills just keeps throwing it to the running back, and that's fine as long as you throw it to Damien Pierce as well. So here's the thing. They go to their bye week. When they come out of it, we're going to be talking about Pierce as an RB1, not a flex, not an RB2. We're going to be talking about him as an RB1 because when a guy gets 90% of the carries and a target share in this range, he's an RB1. It's that simple.
Too much usage.
Yeah.
That's it.
And he's producing too. He's effective.
Oh, absolutely. All right, let's also talk Justin Jefferson, who had a 23-yard pass.
Start him.
12 catches and 154 yards. How good is this guy?
Look, I'll go out on a limb here and say you start Justin Jefferson every week. Okay, I'll be the guy to say it. What everyone's are there people saying this? I don't know, I'll say it. Why are we talking about Justin Jefferson?
In case you were worried, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he had those 2 games where he was down a little bit, but you start Justin Jefferson. He is a superstar. He's the best dynasty asset out there. He's the man. You start Justin Jefferson, you saw why today. Another great game.
Let's talk about his teammate, Dalvin Cook, who we've watched him be really good before, but we were coming into this. How's he going to look with his shoulder injury? And he looked pretty stinking fantastic this week.
Yeah, he had his best game of the season, 94 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, only 2 catches for 27 additional receiving yards. You got to love 2 touchdowns in the first 6 carries for him. That's pretty great. It's his first game with over 14 plus fantasy points this season. He's also had at least 17 carries in 4 of his last 5. But here's, I said only 2 catches. He's also had only 4 targets in his last 3 games. That's a career low 8% target share. Not what we expected, frankly, with Kevin O'Connell coming in. But if you are efficient and you are attached to an offense that has Justin Jefferson stretching the field and maybe you're seeing a good share of light boxes, you will take it.
Heck yeah. I mean, he looked fantastic today. And anytime you get 26.1 fantasy points, any one of those fears that you had about that shoulder injury, like as long as he's good to go and Stephon tells me not worried about it, he's in your starting lineup every single week, obviously. Let's talk about another running back, Liz, that had 2 touchdowns this week as well. Your friend Austin Eckler. Holy cow, he showed out huge.
Yeah, it's interesting. I took the under on his 50.5 rushing yards prop. That was the only prop I missed on this week, by the way. And I feel like he saw it and I'm about to get an I told you so text in the morning. But 173 rushing yards, absolutely smashed the over on that one. Plus a touchdown, also 4 catches for 26 yards and another receiving score. On pace right now as a pass catcher for 105 catches over the season. He's got at least 18 touches in 4 of 5 games this season. I mean, this is why you drafted him ahead of Christian McCaffrey, right? Right?
Well, I mean, it's at least you're right, Liz. That's a good call from that standpoint.
I'll say this. I think people would be surprised to know that through the 1 o'clock games yesterday, actually through the 4s as well, Austin Eckler, the #1 scoring fantasy running back for the season. Yeah. Think about that slow start when people were panicking about him. Right now, we obviously Monday Night Football still pending, but right now he is the #1 scoring fantasy running back ahead of Saquon Barkley and Nick Chubb. So he's made up for that slow start, if you will.
Yeah, from that standpoint. All right, Mike, let's talk about a couple of Eagles here. Miles Sanders and Devonta Smith. We've watched Miles Sanders be really good in this offense, and he's been utilized on the ground. Unfortunately, Jalen Hurts continues to steal the goal line work away from him. Or maybe fortunately if you're a Jalen Hurts manager. Yeah,
Hurts 15 rushing touchdowns in his last 16 games. And obviously that'll put a cap on the rushing touchdowns for the running backs naturally. But, Sanders has at least 15 touches in every game this season. He's been good. He has a handful of touchdowns. He's playing well. It's a good high-scoring offense. Not too worried about Miles Sanders. I'm not saying he's an elite top 5 guy, but he's way better than what you paid in your draft. And he's been a weekly starter. That's what he's going to continue to be.
And in that offense where they're continuing to move the ball and they're getting in the end zone as much as they have, you love a running back that has that opportunity. And Devonta Smith, we saw it this week, 11 targets again. I mean, so much usage for this guy is fantastic. 18.70 fantasy points, 10 catches, 11 targets for 87 yards.
Yeah, at least 7 catches now in 3 of his last 4 games. And the exception was the Jags game, which it was wet, right? It was raining. So he's picked it up after the slow start. He had that rough week 1. Since then, he's been good. And again, you're starting A.J. Brown. You're still starting Miles Sanders. You're starting Jalen Hurts, Dallas Goedert. And you're starting Devonta Smith right now. I don't know how you bench a guy with the ceiling he has.
Yeah, you're starting every single Eagle out there, I would think.
Almost. Not Quez Watkins. But you know what? You know why we love Quez Watkins?
Best ball.
Because he has, among all, you look at the top 3 wide receivers for every team on a weekly basis, the lowest projected target share I do every week for a number 3 receiver is Quez Watkins. They're right around 3%. They do not throw to other guys, right? It's very rare that they do that, but we love that because that means they're getting the ball to Brown and they're getting it to Goddard and not really Sanders as much, but certainly Devontae Smith as well. So as long as they keep funneling to those guys, we're happy.
I'm good with narrow target trees. That does not bother me.
That's exactly right. That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
We love those.
I'm good with that. All right. Let's talk about Cam Akers, another running back here. Only 33 rushing yards, did not catch his only target. This is going to be a tough backfield, right? And they're going to have even more difficult matchups coming ahead. Mike, I don't know what to do if I'm a Cam Akers manager.
Do you not know what to do? I mean, the decision at this point is drop or bench at this point, right? I mean, the fact that he handled all 100% of their carries. So every time they ran it, that's good. They have committed to him as their lead rusher, but he doesn't have much involvement in the passing game. He has at least 45 rushing yards in one game this season. It's just not happening for him, unfortunately. Their offensive line is struggling. The offense is struggling. Maybe when the matchup is better and you look at the schedule and say, okay, this is a plus matchup. Cam Akers is a guy you can consider for your flex based on the rushing workload, but it's tough right now. I think he's fine for your bench, but he's droppable. I mean, he's not a must start and he's not a must roster at this point.
No, you're right. I just don't think it's going to get better for a while for the Rams. Like, they have a really tough schedule. Panthers don't count. 49ers, and then the Buccaneers, the Cardinals, the Saints, the Chiefs, and they get the Seahawks. All right, but
not many times where you feel good with him as a starter. There's no doubt about it, especially with Darrell Henderson so involved. And don't forget, you just mentioned a handful of games, right? A week or two from now, we're going to start hearing rumblings of Kyron Williams' return. And, as Adam Schefter told us before the season, he was going to play a big role in that week 1 game. He was going to play a big role. He got hurt in special teams, and that was the end of it. But he'll be back in the next few weeks.
And Ben Skoranek is going to keep getting targets over Allen Robinson for some reason, and we're just going to keep rolling with it. All right, Liz, let's talk about another running back here. Jeff Wilson, 120 rushing yards and a touchdown. Got in the end zone for you here. It was a pretty nice day from Jeff Wilson.
Yeah, the magic number for Jeff Wilson is sweet 17. That was the number of touches he saw today. It's the number of carries he's seen in 3 of his past 4 games, and it's the number of totes he averaged down the stretch last season when Eli Mitchell was sidelined. So if you have a running back in a scheme that is as friendly to the running back as Kyle Shanahan's is, and they are seeing 17 carries per game, you're going to start them every week. This was his best game of the season, obviously, over 100 rushing yards, as you mentioned, and that score, it's his 3rd straight game over 70 rushing yards.
I mean, you love that, being over 70 rushing yards in 3 straight. Let's talk about George Kittle, because George Kittle has been tough. I just really quickly want to list a couple of names here of guys that scored more fantasy points than him. Daniel Bellinger scored on a double end around, double tight end around, in case I guess we're doing that now.
Yeah, I guess so.
Cade Otton, who Mike, by the way, mentioned during fantasy football.
So did Liz. We were both on him today.
Rostered in 0.5% of leagues, available in 99.5% of leagues, scored more points. Zach Gentry, Eric Saubert.
Okay, that's enough.
Durham Smythe.
That's enough. We get the point.
Guys,
stop the pain.
What are you going to do with George Kittle this week? I mean, coming out of this week, I guess.
We're not going to do anything. I mean, I don't think you can sit him. Stefania said on Wednesday's pod, he almost had a touchdown. Obviously, he's being asked to do more in this offense outside of just catching the ball, but he's George Kittle, and he did manage 5 catches. This is tight end. Like, that is, if you have a tight end and they put up 5 points because they've given you 5 catches, I don't think you're crying about it. You're just crying about it because you drafted George Kittle earlier than that and you expected more. And I would also say, and I'm interested to hear what Mike thinks about this, there is not going to be enough volume in this offense to support all of these pieces, right? We know Jeff Wilson's going to get his 17 carries a game, but you've got George Kittle, you've got Deebo Samuel, you've got Brandon Ayuk. You're not going to see 10 targets for each of these guys in a Kyle Shanahan offense with Jimmy Garoppolo under center.
Mm-hmm. And it didn't support them last year with Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Brandon Ayuk was not fantasy relevant. Deebo Samuel was fantastic, but for half the season, a lot of that damage was done on the ground. And George Kittle, by the way, was extremely boom bust last year. He had a couple of huge games. He had a lot of down games, which we talked about on Fantasy Football Now prior to this week. So, yeah, I think that's just the nature of the beast with George Kittle. I did rank him closer to a fringe tight end 1 this week, and that's where he'll be going forward. I don't know that he's a lineup lock necessarily, but as Liz pointed out, you don't have many better options right now, right? Like you look at your options at tight end, you're like, yeah, I'm not picking up any of these guys. Juwan Johnson, nah, I'll stick with George Kittle.
So I hear you. I guess I hear that. It's all about roster construction, right? Because like on the leagues where I've had George Kittle, I've picked up a bunch of tight ends off the waiver wire.
Yeah, like what? Hayden Hurst and Daniel Bellinger and
Tyler Higbee and David Njoku.
Okay, well, Higbee. Guys. Okay, so you're picking the only.
So I guess I'm
but there's a lot.
Fantasy, Mike.
But right now, though. But I'm saying right now, you have George Kittle, and you're starting in the past few years. You're probably not holding another good tight end.
No.
So you're looking at waivers and who are you picking up to put in
Disley.
there? No, you're not doing that. He didn't score today.
You're right. But hey, this is the point. Like. Fantasy managers every single week go through this exercise. It is an emotional game. You get frustrated because you're like, I used a high pick on George Kittle. Yeah, you better believe I'm going to start one of these tight ends over him. You're saying, don't let your heart do that. Don't.
Yeah, I mean, you reevaluate every single week, but also, I mean, people who spend an early pick on the breakout sensation Gabe Davis benched him today. Some people did.
All right.
And how'd that go? You know, sometimes you got to stick it out with guys that are on the field a lot, and we know our talents. Eventually they'll come through with big days, but I get it. And look, hey. I'm frustrated with Kittle as well. I have him on some teams.
That leads us directly into this next conversation, Mike Clay.
Okay.
If you roster DJ Moore, what the heck are you supposed to do there? Am I allowed to drop DJ Moore? No, he's just a bench.
No, yeah, you could bench him. I mean, the target share has been pretty good this season, 6 or more targets in every game, but he has not reached 60 receiving yards. But here's the thing. At some point, you have to imagine a quarterback change is coming for Carolina. I don't know when Sam Darnold's going to be healthy enough to play, and it's probably not good for the Carolina's win-loss record if he does play. But Baker Mayfield has not played well, and he has not maximized DJ Moore. Sam Darnold did maximize DJ Moore last year, so maybe a quarterback change gets him pointed in the right direction. This is a guy that entered this year with 1,100-plus yards in 3 consecutive seasons. He's one of the best talents at that position, and he's been super productive and a high-floor player. So DJ Moore is a guy that, I mean, we'd have to be like Kenny Golladay level non-production to consider dropping him, and we are not there. We're not close to that.
Wow.
He's still playing, and I don't know, he's getting you around 10 points. You're not getting 20-point games, or 15-point games even, but you're getting around 10. It's enough for me to hold tight for now with DJ Moore, at least on my bench.
Just feels like a really, really low floor. A really low floor and a pretty low ceiling right now, but too much.
He's just too good to drop.
Yes.
He's just too good to drop. He's was made for benches for now. I mean, I guess like that. His floor is bench. His floor is the bench, right? His floor is not drop, right? So
all right,
that's how I feel about him. And hopefully the quarterback change happens at some point.
Liz, let's talk about another wide receiver that struggled this week. And Brandon Cooks was all right last week, but we watched Davis Mills try and find him a handful of times. Only 6 targets here, 6 fantasy points for Brandon Cooks.
Well, Mike mentioned it earlier. Davis Mills likes throwing to those running backs, not Brandon Cooks. His target share has dwindled every single week. Started week 1 with 12. That has been divided in half to 6 this week. It's his 3rd single-digit fantasy game of the season. I don't know. This might be the year that he doesn't actually hit 1,000 yards. Just 4 catches for 20 yards, 6 fantasy points. Here you go. Who are you starting? Brandon Cooks or DJ Moore? I'm going to start DJ Moore.
Oh, I would start Brandon Cooks.
That's a tough one. I mean, Cooks has had one good game this year, so that's not something more. Well, Moore scored a touchdown in that one game, but I think Cooks week 4 was better than Moore's week 2 or whatever it was, right? I don't know. It's a tough call. I mean, they both are seeing respectable target shares overall this season. Cooks is higher.
Neither is attached to a particularly good quarterback.
No.
Can we bench them both? I feel like Cooks, by the way, is another one of them guys that has his floor is the bench, right? Yeah. Another guy I don't want to drop, but I don't know if he's going to get a quarterback change. But here's the thing. Cooks and Mills had a good connection last year, right? So maybe something gets figured out and turns it around. You know, as recently as 2 weeks ago, he was top 10 in the league. Actually, through last week, he was top 10 in targets. So I'm still going to stick with Cooks as a flex option. But again, you've had a lot of duds here, and we're through week 5 now. That's a problem.
All right, we got a few more guys, and we are almost done here. Let's talk about these Commanders wide receivers. Mike, you and I were watching this game, and you know what was not fun?
What was not fun?
Watching Damien Brown catch 2 long touchdown passes. It's like this Jahan Dotson role is just the role within this offense. And Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel, someone that all three of us loved and talked about on Fantasy Football Now on Sunday. Like, it feels so frustrating from a fantasy perspective. What are you doing with these Commanders wide receivers?
Yeah, we can make like a whole group here, a team of like DJ Moore, Brandon Cooks, Terry McLaurin, these guys that are just hanging on. They're seeing just enough work to kind of hang in the flex conversation, but the production and the big games are just not there. I mean, Terry McLaurin does have at least 75 receiving yards in 3 of his last 4 games, right? And with a player at that level, that's hard to bench, right? He's just, you know how good he is. I do want the target share to go up a little bit. It's down from last season. Curtis Samuel, he had that really strong start to the season, but he does have at least 6 catches in 4 of the 5 games. He's averaging 9 targets per game still. So I know the touchdowns kind of disappeared and the production's down a little bit, but he's still getting a pretty decent amount of volume. He's on the field a lot, and Jahan Dotson could miss another game. So it should still be McLaurin and Samuel as their go-to guys. But yeah, it's disappointing, especially with Logan Thomas out as well. I mean, you just want more out of these guys.
Really quickly, and we don't really have this on the note, but super awesome to see Brian Robinson back and playing in this backfield, which is super fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Had a handful of carries, was leading them in rushing for quite a while, and not a lot of volume from their rushing game here, but he was brought along a little slowly, but it was basically a 3-person split, and his role should only increase. So if he's still out there in your league, you should pick him up.
Absolutely go out and pick him up, and we will talk about him on Tuesday with Eric Moody if he is still available on the waiver wire. All right, Liz, let's talk about a couple more players here, and we have the Arizona Cardinals, where Hollywood Brown just continues to be a target monster for Kyler Murray here.
It's as we expected, right? No DeAndre Hopkins, though. Hopkins does come back, I believe, in week 7. Correct? Yes. Week 7 is when the target for Nuke is going to be back. We don't know how rusty he'll be, so that's something to think about. And obviously the connection between Brown and Murray is solid. Dates back to their college days, so we're not messing with the rapport too much. And I love the volume. 10 targets again today. Brown has gone over 65 receiving yards for 4 straight efforts. It's really hard to sit him. And next week, he gets the Seattle Seahawks. We've already talked about that defense and what a matchup it is. So if you're starting Kyler Murray, guess what? You're also starting Marquise Brown. And if you're thinking about, Brandon Cooks and DJ Moore and what am I going to do with these 2 guys, maybe you want to flex Rondell Moore again, given week 6's matchup against Seattle. He had 8 targets in this one, caught 7 of those for 68 yards. 3rd on the team in targets, but again, the matchup and the speed and the health all returning. So next week, probably going to be a flex option for me.
Yeah, heck yeah. It's hard to argue with that. Love being able to see all the usage for Rondell Moore from that perspective. All right. That's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, Mike. It's so good to have you here.
Yeah, it's been a blast as always.
It's been a blast as always. Liz, appreciate you so much. We will be back tomorrow. Me, Field Stefania, recapping Monday Night Football. We are talking waiver wire with Eric Moody, getting you set up for everything you need with week 6 and your first set of bye weeks. Make sure you come back and check it out. We love you guys. See you then.